The moment Nolan Lane saw the woman in the red heels stumble out of the mansion's side door and into the shadows, he knew something wasn't right. She looked like she couldn't breathe. The party behind her was still roaring, music blasting, champagne glasses clinking, people shouting over each other in a war of designer perfumes and overgelled hair, but she stood frozen at the edge of the hedges, her hands trembling like she'd just outrun something. "You okay?" Nolan asked, shifting his toddler daughter, Kinsey, higher onto his hip as he stepped off the gravel path. The woman turned, startled. Her eyes darted to the little girl in his arms, then back to him. I just needed air," she said quickly, trying to compose herself. She straightened her dress, but her fingers were still shaking. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," he said gently. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I'm not," she argued, though her voice cracked. Kinsey frowned, her curls bouncing. "Daddy," she looked sad. The woman let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Smart kid. I've got water in the truck," Nolan said, nodding toward the beat-up pickup parked behind a row of luxury cars. "It's not Perrier or anything, but it's cold." She hesitated, glancing back at the house. "I won't ask questions," he added. "And I won't let you faint in those heels. Come on." Her shoulders dropped. "Okay," she whispered. He led her toward the truck. Kinsey clung sleepily to his shoulder, thumb in her mouth. The woman walked slowly, like she wasn't used to gravel under her feet. "I'm Nolan," he said, opening the passenger door and reaching into the cooler behind the seat. "And this sleepy one's Kinsey." "Hi, Kinsey," the woman said softly. Kinsey blinked at her, then offered her a gummy bear from a crumpled candy bag. The woman smiled for the first time. "Thank you." Nolan handed her a bottle of water. "You can sit for a bit if you want. I won't bite." She climbed into the truck, careful with her dress, and sighed as she took a long drink. "I'm Viera," she said after a moment. "Viera Vaughn." "Nice to meet you, Viera." He leaned on the open door. "You sure you're okay?" "Not really," she admitted. "But I will be." He nodded, not pushing. "You want me to drive you somewhere?" "No," she said quickly. "I can't. I just needed to get away from all that for a minute." Kinsey tugged on his jacket. "Can I give her my juice box?" He grinned. "Sure, baby." Viera accepted the tiny offering with a soft, "Thank you," and Nolan watched her for the first time. She was beautiful, but not in the over-polished way the other women at the party were. She looked exhausted, like she'd been holding her breath all night. Her earrings probably cost more than his rent, but there was something raw in her eyes. Something real. "Is that your party?" he asked finally. "My parents," she said, eyes narrowing. "My father's business thing. I wasn't supposed to leave." "So why'd you leave?" She looked at him. "Because I felt like I was suffocating." He understood that too well. "I'm a single dad," he said, glancing at Kinsey. "I do landscaping during the week, drive on weekends. I was dropping off some chairs for the party and Kinsey needed to nap, so I stayed in the truck." "Guess that makes me the unofficial getaway car." Viera smiled faintly. "You're not what I expected." "What were you expecting?" She looked at the mansion, then back at him. "Someone who'd try to impress me, or ask who I am, or get weird when I don't tell them." "I don't care who you are," he said simply. "You looked like you needed help. That's all that mattered." She blinked at him, like she wasn't used to people saying things like that. He reached into the cooler and pulled out a juice box. "And I think you really do want this." She really laughed this time and took it. The next day, Nolan didn't expect to see her again. But there she was, standing in front of his small house with her heels in her hand and a tired look in her eyes. "I took a cab," she said quickly when he stepped onto the porch, Kinsey peeking out from behind his legs. "I don't have your number," he said. "I asked around," she admitted. "I remembered your name. I wanted to say thank you, and maybe apologize for hijacking your truck." "Don't apologize," he said. "You didn't hijack anything. You got in, drank a juice box, and left." Viera knelt down to Kinsey's level. "Hi again." Kinsey blinked up at her. "You look happier now." "I am," Viera said softly. Over the next few weeks, Viera came back. At first, it was just visits. She'd bring Kinsey books or flowers she picked up from a market. Nolan would make grilled cheese or spaghetti, and they'd sit on the porch under the string lights he'd hung last summer. She didn't talk about her family or the parties or the endless events she clearly hated. He didn't ask, but they talked about other things. He told her about raising Kinsey alone after her mom left when she was barely one. About working 2 jobs, and still not making enough to fix the leaky roof. About how tired he was, but how he wouldn't trade Kinsey for anything. And she listened, really listened. One night, while Kinsey slept on the couch inside, Nolan and Viera sat on the porch steps, watching the stars. "Why do you come here?" he asked her quietly. She didn't answer right away. "Because it's quiet," she said finally. "Because no one here expects me to be anything I'm not." She looked at him, eyes soft. "Because when I'm here, I feel like I can breathe again." He didn't say anything. Just reached over and took her hand. She let him. It wasn't until a month later that everything changed. One Saturday, Nolan was working a landscaping job near the city when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver got out, opened the back door, and out stepped Viera. In a navy dress, heels, sunglasses. She looked like someone else. "Viera?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. She looked nervous. "I wanted to tell you sooner." He glanced at the car. The driver. The expensive watch on her wrist. "You're rich," he said flatly. She winced. "I'm a Vaughn." He staggered back a step. "Vaughn? As in Vaughn Enterprises. As in the company that owned half of downtown." "You're a millionaire," he said, stunned. She nodded. "Probably more." Kinsey ran up to him, grabbing his leg. "Daddy, can we go home now?" He picked her up slowly, then looked back at Viera. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to look at me like you're looking at me right now." He was quiet for a long time, trying to process it. "I'm still me," she said. "I'm still the woman who sat in your truck drinking juice boxes and reading bedtime stories to your daughter." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the same woman from that night. The one who looked like she was drowning. The one who felt real. "I don't care about the money," he said finally. "But I do care about being lied to." "I never lied," she said softly. "I just didn't tell you everything." He nodded slowly. "Okay." She stepped forward. "Nolan, I didn't expect to feel this way. About any of this. I didn't plan on falling for a guy with a beat-up truck and a kid who steals my heart every time she calls me her friend. But I did. I fell for both of you." He stared at her, heart racing. And for the first time in a long time, he wanted to believe someone. Especially her. Nolan hadn't planned on letting her stay. He'd meant to give her a few words, maybe a nod, then turned back to his work and the half-trimmed hedges waiting behind him. But when Viera stepped out of that car, everything in him jolted like someone had reached into his chest and twisted. Now, standing on the edge of a manicured lawn with hedge clippers in one hand and his daughter watching from the truck cab with a bag of crackers, Nolan realized there was no easy way to step back from this. "I didn't mean to ambush you," Viera said, her voice lower than usual. "I just couldn't stop thinking about the look on your face." "You didn't ambush me," he said, setting the clippers on the grass. "But you did blindside me." Viera took a breath and looked around at the estate-lined street. "I didn't want this to be the way you found out." "No." He crossed his arms, waiting. "Then what way were you hoping for?" She met his gaze, her chin lifting. "I thought I'd have more time to show you who I am away from all of this." He studied her, from the sleek lines of her dress to the polished car still idling at the curb. "You don't get to untangle yourself from all of this, Viera. It's part of you." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "But it doesn't define me. Not the way you think." He shifted his weight, not sure what to say to that. "I'm not here to beg," she added, "or make excuses. I'm here because I care about you." "And Kinsey." At the mention of his daughter, Nolan's spine straightened. "She's in the truck," he said, his voice quiet. "I can see her," Viera said, offering a small wave. Kinsey waved back, then pressed her face to the window, clearly curious. "I didn't plan on any of this," Viera said, "but I don't want to walk away from it either." Nolan didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he walked to the truck, opened the door, and lifted Kinsey out carefully. She clung to him, eyeing Viera like she was trying to figure out if she was allowed to be excited. "Do you want to say hi?" Nolan asked her gently. Kinsey nodded slowly. "Is she sad again?" "No," Viera said, crouching down so they were eye level. "Not today." "Good," Kinsey said, then reached out and took her hand. Viera's lips parted, surprised. "I drew a picture for you," Kinsey said, pulling a folded paper from her jacket pocket. "It's us on the porch with lemonade." Viera took the drawing like it was made of glass. "It's perfect." Kinsey leaned against her father's shoulder, satisfied. Nolan watched her closely. "She doesn't let go of people easily." "I won't give her a reason to," Viera said, her voice steady now. He nodded once and looked toward the truck. We were heading home. You want to come? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. They drove in silence for most of the ride. Kinsey dozed off in the back seat, the picture still clutched in Viera's hand. At the house, Nolan carried his daughter inside while Viera sat on the porch swing, her heels tucked beside her. The wind teased strands of her hair loose, and she didn't bother fixing them. When Nolan came back outside, he had 2 mugs in hand. You still drink tea? He asked. I do, she said, accepting the cup. Thanks. He sat beside her, letting the quiet stretch between them. Where's your driver? He asked finally. I told him to leave, she said. I didn't want to walk up here with someone standing behind me like I was royalty. He nodded. Makes sense. I'm trying, she said softly, to figure out a way to live on both sides. Is that even possible? I don't know yet, she admitted, but I know I'm not ready to give up the side that feels like home. He glanced at her. You think this me, Kinsey? The porch is home? I don't think, she said. I know. They sat in silence again, the kind that wasn't heavy, just full of thought. Do your parents know you're here? He asked. She shook her head. They wouldn't understand. They want measured alliances, curated partnerships. Not this. He didn't ask what this meant. He didn't need to. And you're okay with walking away from all that? I've already started, she said. I'm moving into a place downtown. No staff. No marble floors. Just me and a lease I signed myself. That surprised him more than anything. You're leaving the mansion? I'm leaving the life I never chose, she said. I don't want to be someone who hides behind gates and wears a mask to survive. He looked down at his hands. It's not easy. Living without safety nets. I don't want nets, she whispered. I want real. Nolan stared at her, then reached out and took the drawing from her lap. She's never drawn anyone but me before. Viera's eyes softened. I'll take good care of it. He handed it back. You better. The next week brought something that neither of them expected. Sunday afternoon, while Nolan was fixing the cabinet hinge in the kitchen, his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but the number was local, so he picked up. Mr. Lane, a clipped voice asked. This is Julian Caro, assistant to Mr. Vaughn. We need to speak immediately regarding your relationship with his daughter. Nolan stiffened. I don't have a relationship with his daughter. Mr. Vaughn would strongly disagree. We're aware of your recent interactions. He's requesting a meeting. Nolan frowned. Is that a threat? No, sir. An invitation. Tomorrow. 11 sharp. Mr. Vaughn's office. The line went dead. He stared at the phone for a long time before setting it down. The next morning, Nolan dropped Kinsey off at daycare and showed up at the towering glass building that housed Vaughn Enterprises. The lobby was cavernous, with polished floors and a receptionist who looked like she didn't blink. He was escorted to the top floor by an assistant who barely said a word. Inside a sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows, a man in a charcoal suit stood behind a desk that looked more like a sculpture than furniture. Mr. Lane, the man said without offering a hand. I've been hearing your name more often than I'd like. Nolan stepped forward. That's not really my concern. I make it my concern when it involves my daughter. Funny, Nolan said. She doesn't seem to think you care much about her choices. Mr. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Viera is impressionable. She gravitates toward novelty. You're a temporary infatuation. I don't care what you think I am. You should, Mr. Vaughn said coldly. Because I protect what's mine. And Viera is still mine. Nolan stepped closer. She's not a possession. She's a Vaughn, the man said. And Vaughns don't end up with landscapers raising children and fixer-uppers. Nolan's jaw tightened. You can walk away now, Mr. Vaughn said smoothly. And I'll make sure your daughter gets into the best schools. That your business gets more clients than you can handle. Quietly. Cleanly. No one needs to get hurt. Nolan laughed once, low and sharp. You think I'd sell her out for a better lawnmower? Mr. Vaughn's expression didn't shift. Everyone has a number. I don't, Nolan said. And if you knew your daughter at all, you'd know she can't be bought either. He turned and walked out without waiting for permission. That night, he didn't tell Viera about the meeting. He wanted to, but something in him said not yet. Instead, he watched her laugh with Kinsey as they made pancakes for dinner, and he told himself he could protect them both from whatever storm was coming. But as he looked out the window at a black car parked 2 houses down, he wasn't so sure anymore. Nolan waited until Kinsey was tucked into bed, her stuffed giraffe curled under one arm and her tiny fingers wrapped around his shirt sleeve. Only after her breathing deepened and the soft hum of the night settled over the house did he step onto the porch. Viera was already there. She wore jeans and a faded hoodie this time. Her legs curled beneath her on the porch swing. A half-empty mug balanced on the armrest beside her. The city lights in the distance cast a faint golden haze over the street, but the porch itself remained dim, lit only by the glow from the kitchen window behind them. He didn't sit right away. He stood there, watching her, unsure how to begin. "You look like you saw something you wish you hadn't," she said, not looking up. He leaned against the railing. "Your father knows about us." Her head turned sharply. "What did he do?" "He made an offer," Nolan said. "Said he could make my life easier if I walked away." Viera's hands clenched in her lap. "He's done this before. I figured. I'll talk to him." "No," Nolan said. "That's not the point. I don't need you to fix it." She stood, crossing toward him. "Then what do you need?" "I need to know if you're ready for what comes next. Because he's not going to back down. And I'm not going to let Kinsey get caught in the middle of a war." Viera's eyes flared. "You think I'd let that happen? I think you want to believe love can fix everything. But it doesn't always work that way." Her expression didn't waver, but her voice softened. "I've never believed anything could fix everything. But I do believe we get to choose what we fight for. This isn't just about you and me anymore." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "Which is why I'm not going to hide anymore." Nolan studied her. "You sure?" "I moved into the apartment. I didn't ask for help. I told the board I'm stepping down from Vaughn Enterprises. Permanently." He blinked. "You're leaving the company?" "I never wanted it," she said. "I was holding on to it out of obligation, not passion. That life isn't mine. And I'm done pretending it is." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You did all that for you." "I did it for us," she whispered. "Because I want to wake up in a place where I'm not afraid of being myself. Where I can help Kinsey with her homework and burn toast and learn what normal feels like." He nodded and pulled her into his arms. She stayed there, resting her forehead against his chest as the porch creaked beneath them and the wind shifted through the trees, cool and steady. The days that followed were quiet. Viera began showing up with groceries and helping Kinsey build elaborate pillow forts in the living room. She fought with the vacuum cleaner, forgot to buy dish soap twice, and started a list on the fridge titled, "Things I have no clue how to do, but will learn." Nolan didn't stop her. He watched. And somewhere between burnt pancakes and late-night movie marathons, he started to believe maybe this could be something lasting. Until the letter arrived. It was hand-delivered by a man in a dark suit who didn't say a word, just nodded and walked away the moment Nolan took the envelope. He opened it in the kitchen, the paper thick and heavy, stamped with the Vaughn family crest. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. A gala. A Vaughn Foundation benefit, black tie, guest list enclosed. And at the bottom, beneath the calligraphy and polished ink, a single line written in a familiar hand. "If you want to understand what she walked away from, come see it for yourself." He didn't show it to Viera right away. He watched her that evening, dancing barefoot with Kinsey in the living room while a scratchy old record played a song none of them knew the words to. He saw the way her eyes lit up when Kinsey laughed, and the way she balanced her chin on the top of the little girl's head when they finally collapsed onto the couch. Later, after Kinsey was asleep and the house was still, he handed her the envelope. Viera read it without a word, her lips tightening. "He's trying to prove a point," she said finally. "Maybe. You're not going." "I think I have to," Nolan said. "Not for him. For me." She looked up. "You want to see what I left behind? I want to understand what it cost you." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll go with you." The night of the gala arrived with unrelenting rain. Nolan buttoned the last clasp on his borrowed tuxedo in the hallway mirror, feeling like a fraud. The suit was too stiff, the shoes too shiny, and the cufflinks belonged to a neighbor who owed him a favor. He didn't belong in this world, but he was walking into it anyway. Viera stepped out of the bedroom in a navy gown with long sleeves and a plunging back, her hair swept up, a single silver chain around her neck. "You look like a movie star," he said, too stunned to move. She smiled faintly. "You look terrified." "I am. You don't have to be." They left Kinsey with Nolan's sister for the night and drove into the city in a car Viera rented herself. No driver. No staff. Just the two of them and the storm outside. The Vaughn Foundation Gala was held in a glass atrium that looked like it belonged on another planet. Crystal chandeliers floated overhead like stars, and the floor was marble so polished Nolan could see his awkward reflection every time he looked down. People turned as they entered. Not because of Viera. Because of him. He wasn't polished. He wasn't pedigreed. He didn't know which fork was for what or how to nod without looking out of place. But he kept his hand on Viera's back and his chin up. Her father stood near the center of the room, surrounded by donors and board members. He didn't smile when he saw them. He didn't frown either. He simply said, "You came." "Only to listen," Nolan said. Mr. Vaughn led them to a quiet corner, away from the crowd. "This is the world she was raised in," he said. "You understand that now?" "I do." And Nolan looked at Viera, then back at him. "I understand why she left." Mr. Vaughn's jaw tightened. "You still think you can give her more than this?" "No," Nolan said. "But I can give her something this place never did." "And what's that?" "Peace." Mr. Vaughn didn't respond. He simply turned and walked away. Later, as they stepped out into the rain, Nolan took off his jacket and draped it over Viera's shoulders before she could protest. They stood there for a moment, soaked and breathless. "You walked through fire for me tonight," she said. "I'd do it again." She reached up, cupped his face, and kissed him with everything she had. And for the first time since they met, Nolan kissed her like he wasn't afraid of what came next. The Monday after the gala, Nolan returned home to find Kinsey sitting on the kitchen counter with her feet swinging and Viera standing in front of the stove, her hair tied back with a pencil and her sleeves rolled up past her elbows. The smell of burnt cinnamon filled the air. "I tried to make French toast," Viera said, holding up a pan that looked like it had lost the battle. "I think I created something illegal instead." Kinsey giggled and pointed to the sink, where a second pan sat smoldering. "She made smoke twice." Nolan walked over, kissed the top of his daughter's curls, and took the pan from Viera's hand. "I'll take over. You're violating at least 3 breakfast codes." Viera leaned against the counter, watching him crack eggs into a bowl without measuring. "That gala was the last thing I needed to see," she said after a moment. "It reminded me of everything I never want to be again." He glanced at her. "Are you sure it didn't make you want to run back to it?" "No," she said simply. "That world doesn't breathe. This one does." Kinsey clapped her hands. "Can we have syrup?" "Only if you promise not to pour it on your dinosaur again," Nolan said, flipping a slice in the pan. "I promise," she said, crossing her heart with a solemn nod. Later that night, after bedtime stories and a long bath for the dinosaur, Nolan and Viera sat on the porch. The air was warmer now, spring carving its way into the edges of the night. He hadn't said what had been weighing on his chest for days, but it pressed harder every time he looked at her. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're quiet." "I've been thinking." "That sounds dangerous." He chuckled, then turned toward her. "I've been doing this alone for so long. Raising Kinsey. Working nonstop. Trying to keep everything from falling apart. I know. But lately, every time I look at you, I think about how different it all feels." She looked up at him. "Different how?" "Lighter. Not easier, just like I'm not carrying it all by myself anymore." Viera's eyes softened. "You're not. I know that now." She slipped her hand into his. "I never thought I'd find this kind of life. Not with my name. Not with my history." "You're not your name," Nolan said. "You're who you choose to be." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I choose this. You. Her. All of it." He kissed her then, slow and certain, like he'd finally caught up with everything his heart had known before his mind had. By the end of the week, the rhythm of their life had settled into something steady. Viera had started working part-time at a local art program for kids. Nolan had taken on fewer landscaping jobs, finally able to breathe without chasing every bill. They were building something quietly, deliberately, and together. One evening, as Nolan finished replacing a cracked porch step, Kinsey came bounding out of the house, her toy camera bouncing around her neck. "Daddy, Daddy, look." He turned as she held up a drawing of a crooked house with a tree and 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. "That's us," she said proudly. "Me, you, and the girl who smells like cookies now." Viera stepped onto the porch behind her, her cheeks flushed. "I may have dropped a tray of snickerdoodles in the oven." Nolan crouched down and picked up the drawing. "This is the best thing I've seen all day." Kinsey beamed. "I want her to stay forever." Viera's breath caught. Nolan looked up at her slowly. "So do I." That night, after Kinsey was asleep, he pulled a small box from beneath the floorboard in the hallway. It wasn't fancy, just a simple velvet case he'd found at a second-hand shop. Inside was a ring with a single stone, modest but beautiful. He found Viera in the backyard, sitting on the swing Kinsey had begged him to hang from the old oak tree. The moonlight caught the edge of her hair, and she looked so at home there it made his chest ache. He walked over and held out the box. I never thought I'd ask this again. But then you came along with your broken shoes and your lemonade promises, and you made everything feel new. She looked up, wide-eyed. Nolan, I'm not rich. I'm not polished. But I will love you with every last piece of me. And I'll protect what we're building until my last breath. Her hand flew to her mouth. Will you marry me? He asked. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, yes, of course. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that was more than just love. It was freedom, joy, and finally, belonging. The wedding was small, held in the backyard under string lights and a sky that painted itself in soft lavender. They exchanged vows barefoot in the grass. Kinsey wore a flower crown she made herself and insisted on walking Viera down the aisle with her stuffed giraffe. There were no photographers, no designer gowns, just close friends, laughter, and enough pie to feed a village. Viera's father didn't attend, but he sent a letter. Short, respectful, not an apology, but a quiet acknowledgement. She burned it after reading it. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the music drifted into slower melodies, Nolan wrapped his arms around his new wife and whispered into her ear. I never thought I'd have this again. You don't have it again, Viera whispered back. You have something new, something better. Kinsey ran past them chasing fireflies, her laughter trailing behind her like music. They stood there, hand in hand, in the middle of the life they had built from nothing but truth, trust, and a chance meeting beside a truck on a noisy night. And for the first time in either of their lives, they felt completely, perfectly, entirely home. The first storm of summer rolled in just after dusk, sweeping across the neighborhood with low thunder and a sky full of restless wind. Nolan stood barefoot on the porch, watching the distant lightning flicker along the horizon. Behind him, the soft glow of the living room spilled onto the wooden floorboards, where Kinsey sat cross-legged with a box of crayons and a stack of construction paper. Viera emerged from the hallway, tying her robe at the waist, her hair still damp from the shower. She padded quietly to his side and leaned against the doorframe, studying his profile. You always get that look when it storms. What look? Like you're waiting for something to go wrong. He didn't answer right away. The wind brushed his skin, carrying the scent of rain and honeysuckle. I guess I still don't believe it's all real sometimes, he said. That it lasted. She reached for his hand. It did. They stood in silence as the first drops hit the roof, soft and rhythmic. Inside, Kinsey's quiet humming filled the space between thunderclaps. Viera turned to him. There's something I've been thinking about. He glanced at her. I want to adopt her, she said, voice steady. He blinked. You want to? I know she's yours. I know I could never replace what came before me. But she's mine too now. Not by blood, but by every other way that matters. Nolan's chest tightened. You really want that? I've never wanted anything more. He stepped toward her, cupping her face with both hands. She already calls you hers. I want it to be official. For her. For us. He nodded slowly. Then let's do it. They kissed beneath the sound of rain, not hurried or passionate, but full of something deeper certainty. The following week, they met with a lawyer in a soft-lit office downtown. The woman wore glasses on a chain and had a voice like warm tea. She looked over the paperwork Viera had prepared and smiled. She's a lucky little girl, she said. Most people wait years before this kind of bond forms. Viera didn't respond. She just folded her hands in her lap, her eyes steady. The process wasn't simple. There were forms, evaluations, and a home visit scheduled without notice. But Nolan and Viera handled everything without complaint. Nolan built a bookcase shaped like a tree for Kinsey's room. Viera started a scrapbook of their life together, carefully captioning each photo in handwriting that grew more confident with every page. One afternoon, as Nolan was trimming branches in a neighbor's yard, a woman walked up the drive. She wore a tailored navy coat and carried a clipboard. You're Nolan Lane? I am. I'm with the Family Services office. I need to speak with you and your wife. He set down the shears and wiped his hands on a rag. She's at home with Kinsey. I'll take you. The woman followed him back, glancing at the lawn, the porch, the chalk drawings still fresh on the walkway. Viera opened the door before they reached it. Kinsey balanced on her hip, her face flushed from playing. The woman introduced herself and stepped inside, asking questions about routines, discipline, school plans, emotional development. Kinsey sat on the couch between them, drawing again, while Nolan and Viera answered everything with calm honesty. When the woman stood to leave, she handed Viera a card. "I've been doing this for over 20 years, she said. "You two are the kind of story that reminds me why I started." The court date arrived on a humid Thursday morning. They dressed simply. Viera wore a pale yellow dress that Kinsey had picked out and a necklace with a small gold charm Nolan had given her the night they got engaged. Nolan wore his best shirt, the sleeves rolled once to the elbow. The courtroom was quiet, just a judge, the lawyer, and a few clerks. Kinsey sat on Nolan's lap, her fingers tracing the veins in his hand, while Viera held the adoption petition in both hands. The judge, a woman with silver hair and a kind face, read through the file and then looked up. "This is a formality," she said. "You've already done the hard part. You've made a family." Viera's eyes filled, and Nolan held her hand tighter. The gavel came down softly. Kinsey was officially, legally, forever Viera's daughter. Afterward, they stopped for ice cream despite the rain outside. Kinsey insisted on 2 scoops and got chocolate on both her parents' shirts before they even left the shop. That night, Nolan tucked her in and sat beside her for a long time, brushing her curls from her face. "Do you know what a day means?" he asked. Kinsey nodded sleepily. "She's my mom now." "She's always been," he whispered. "Now the world just knows it too." Viera stood in the doorway, watching with her arms folded, her eyes full. When he finally stepped into the hallway, she wrapped her arms around him. "I used to think I'd never be enough," she said into his chest. "That I'd always be pretending." "You never were," he said. "You've been more than enough since the day you showed up with nothing but a pair of broken heels and a tired smile." "I want to do something," she said suddenly. "For you. You do everything for me. I mean something big." He laughed. "You don't have to buy me a car." "No," she said, pulling back. "But I can build you something." He raised a brow. "Build?" "The old nursery building next to the library went up for lease. I want to turn it into a community garden and workshop. For kids. For parents. For anyone who needs it." He blinked. "You serious?" "It's already in motion. I filed the paperwork under your name. You'll run it. I'll fund it. We'll make it part of our everyday." He didn't speak for a second. Then he pulled her close and kissed her with so much depth she gasped against him. They opened the garden a month later. It wasn't fancy, but it was vibrant. The walls were painted with murals Kinsey helped design. There were rows of vegetables, flower beds, and a small tool shed with Nolan's name carved above the door. They hosted workshops on Saturdays, story time on Wednesdays, and a potluck every month where the community came together like family. One afternoon, as Nolan cleaned up after a planting session, he heard Kinsey's laughter from the back corner. He turned to see her covered in dirt, holding a tomato like a trophy, Viera laughing beside her. He walked over, kissed Viera's temple, and crouched beside them. "You know," he said, brushing a leaf from Kinsey's hair, "I used to think we were just surviving. Now we're thriving," Viera said, nudging him with her knee. Kinsey held up the tomato. "This one's for dinner." They smiled, and in that moment, under the warm sun and surrounded by everything they'd built together, it was clear they had created a life better than either of them had imagined. A life not born of luck or wealth, but of choice, of growth, and of love that refused to quit. Years passed quietly but full. Kinsey grew tall and sharp-witted, inheriting her father's steadiness and her mother's fire. The garden expanded, the workshop became a cornerstone of the neighborhood, and Nolan and Viera continued to love without pause or condition. On their 10th anniversary, they renewed their vows beneath the same oak tree where he once proposed. Kinsey officiated, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big and holding a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked herself. "Do you promise to keep loving each other even when you're old and weird?" she asked. "We do," they said together. And under a sky streaked with gold, with laughter echoing across the yard and hands clasped tightly, Nolan and Viera Lane kissed again. Still home. Still together. Forever.